Building the Future, Green Building in the New Millennium, brought to you by Sustainable Homes of the Future. Our natural world is in crisis. Buildings emit 40% of carbon globally. We need solutions now. Join the conversation today.
All right. Well, welcome to the Building Our Future podcast. My name is Ian Sollenberger. I'm the host. I'll be doing an interview today, which is pretty exciting. And I have with me today, super excited to introduce Brian Hennessey. He is currently the Senior Vice President at Avison Young, works in commercial real estate, formerly of Yunnan Properties, Colliers International. He is also an author of the #1 Amazon bestselling The Due Diligence Handbook for Commercial Real Estate, as well as the How to Add Value Handbook for Commercial Real Estate. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Yeah, glad to have you on. Obviously, this is a sustainability podcast, and so jumping right into like market analyses and things like that might seem like a bit of a left turn, but from my perspective and in our discussions previously, it's really important to know where we're at right now before we can kind of understand where we're headed. And I think a big part of sustainability as an overarching term or as a concept is, all right, where do we come from? Using history, using current market analyses, and then kind of projecting what are we looking at as we build the future. I mean, that is the name of the podcast. So first question I'd love to ask you is, you wrote these books. I'd love to know what the impetus was for your handbooks. And then also as sort of a second question, the how to add value. Give us an idea of sort of an overview of how you've been adding value in your own work and what you've seen in the industry over the last few years, over your career. You don't have to go into tons of depth, but what are some of the traditional value adds for commercial real estate, and why did you write these books, I guess?
Okay, it's a fair question.
Yeah.
Fair questions. Let me give you a little context as to my background and how that came about. I've been in the commercial real estate industry for over 35 years in different facets of it, and how the books came about is basically what happened. I had been a commercial broker for about 18 years when a client of mine who was starting his real estate investment firm asked me to come to his firm to become the acquisition disposition vice president for him. And I thought that would be a fairly easy slide since I had been a broker for 18 years. What I found out once I got there, it was very different from being a broker. And what happened was the first couple of transactions that I was involved with when I first got there were two large office buildings, one 300,000 feet, one 200,000 feet in Dallas. And we were buying them from a Canadian investment firm. And the vice president of the Canadian investment firm that I was dealing with quickly surmised I was new at buying large office properties. So he decided to take full advantage of that. And what happened was the investor a client of mine who hired me on as his vice president of acquisition dispositions didn't have enough room in his office at the time. He only had a 1,500-foot office, and he was growing, and he stuck me in a vacant office all by myself that was about 7,000 feet. And I had this desk there, and on my desk I had a bunch of legal pads, and I was writing down all the questions that people were asking and information they needed and who I was supposed to get it from. And what ended up happening was it just became a super stressful scenario because I was really not familiar with all the information that I was supposed to be sifting through and gathering and deciphering. And what happened was the heat just got turned up during the due diligence period. It was 30 days due diligence. And as the clock was ticking, so we were getting towards the end, I was getting more and more questions from the investors, the real estate attorney, the accountant, the lender. And I was just, I couldn't wait for the process to end. And I was totally stressed out, sleepless nights.
I'm sure.
Finally, it ended. I was like, oh, thank God. And then a couple of weeks after we closed escrow, I was coming into the office one morning, and one of the gals said, "Oh, yeah, an investor wants to, see you." I said, "Okay." So I put my stuff down. I went over to his office. And he said, "Yeah, come on in, have a seat." So I sat down, and he got up, closed the door behind me, and after a long silence, he said, "I just want to know how you missed all that information that we were going through when we were buying those properties." And I was like, "What information specifically are you talking about?" And then he started going down the list, and I said, "Well, I didn't know about that. I didn't think to ask about that. I didn't, it was like," and then it was evident that I was missed some critical information I should have had, right?
Humble experience, I'm sure.
It was, I was embarrassed. I really didn't know what to say. It was kind of humiliating. And then he finally said to me, I think I made a huge mistake in hiring you as my acquisition person. And at that point, I was even wondering, if he was correct at that point. It was like, you know what, maybe he's right. Maybe I was just way over my head. So that night when I went home, I just couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning all night, wondering how I missed all that information and everything. And then I just decided when I got up the next morning, you know what, I'm going to write myself a manual, a reference manual. I'm never going to let that happen again. I'm going to put all the questions I need to ask, all the issues I need to review, all the checklists I need. And I'm just going to keep a running track of all the lessons I learned when I'm doing this. And we ended up
document almost.
What's that?
Like
it was just for my own reference,
sure,
basically. So I didn't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And we ended up buying like 8.5 million square feet of property in less than 4 years, all over the country. And it was a lot of information and different markets. And we actually bought even a very large hotel.
Wow.
And so it was a huge learning curve I had to go through, but I learned more in that time than I did in the previous 18 years about investments. Yeah. And we bought some from some of the biggest institutional owners in the world, for that matter. So that's where you learn a lot of lessons.
I'm sure, yeah.
Those are the pros,
Yep.
So what happened is I ended up going off on my own after about 4 years of being with them and started my own syndication company. And then I bought a 350,000 foot portfolio of office properties in Houston. And that was in March of 2007. And that was really a huge learning curve because we just were at the beginning of the Great Recession was just coming down the pike at us.
Yeah.
And so that was, a big time. 3.5 years I held onto those properties, but the great news was I managed to keep them occupied, cash flowing, 82% occupied.
Great. During that time.
During a very, very tough time.
Yeah.
But
what was that, if you don't mind my asking, just in brief, was that creativity on your part? Was it just, diligence of sort of continuing?
It was a combination of a lot of things. I was just hell bent to make sure that I was doing everything in my power. If a tenant gave us a proposal that was 5,000 feet or more, I'd fly out to Houston and meet them face to face.
Yeah.
Try to make the deal. If a tenant said they were going to be moving out, I'd fly there and meet with them and just say, what do I have to do to keep you here? How can we structure this to make it make sense for you to stay? Right.
Yeah.
So, but the bad news was I ended up, the loan that I had ended up getting bought by GE Capital, and they actually ended up foreclosing on the properties, taking them
Hmm.
because I didn't meet the stringent formulas for debt coverage ratio service, debt service,
Yeah.
DCSR. So, and I tried very hard. I actually sued him during the process because Texas is a very lender-friendly state. If you get a notice of default, you have to reinstate within 21 days, and then if you don't, then they sell it on the courthouse steps the next month, first Tuesday of next month.
Wow.
So I decided, even though the odds were stacked against me, to go ahead and sue him, because I asked my attorneys what the options, what were the odds, and they said 50-50, depends on your judge and the circumstances. And I ended up staying the foreclosure. It
Wow.
won.
Wow.
And it was like,
You were just learning on the fly, weren't you?
yeah, they were
That's
flabbergasted. It was like, what? And the judge just said, hey, they must know what they're doing. If they're cash flowing in this horrible time, you should try to work this out with them, right? So, but what ended up happening is, even if I got them to agree, and I had to take them out because I went to talk to a bankruptcy attorney, because couple of the partners were real estate attorneys who were trying to force the bankruptcy of the entity, which brings personal foreclosure, right? Personal guarantee, right?
Yeah.
But I was willing to do it if it would have helped investors out. But he said, hey, if you win, right? If they say, okay, just give us our money, you're right, it's only worth this, right? Can you go out and get a loan right now? I don't know. It's $6-7 million I'd probably have to come up with. So just give them the keys in. But anyway, it was one of the hardest things I ever had to go through in my career. But I learned a ton.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, don't be afraid to go out there and take chances. Just make sure they're calculated chances, and that's failure and success are just kind of interrelated. You don't have one without the other, So
Exactly. Yeah.
But so when I got back into brokerage, I didn't know what to do because I had been out for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to take my little reference manual and turn it into a investor handbook and put it up on Amazon, which I wouldn't even spend the, $100 to get a cover done, because I never thought it was one copy. I was like, well, I'm gonna spend money for it. Like, it's just to tell people, it's just a marketing thing,
Yeah.
And it ended up selling copies, and I was like, wow, people must think this is useful information. So I ended up taking it seriously and getting a professional cover done, and I put some stories in it about personal experiences and what have you, to make it more relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up doing very well. And to this day, it still does very well. It blows my mind still, but it's been a very gratifying experience because a lot of people have gotten help from it. So
yeah. So yeah, I was just going to say, so my second part of my question, sort of, what are a couple of the traditional value adds that on the how to add value to commercial property? Like, what are some of those that you talk about in the book?
Well, that one I wrote because what I found was a lot of owners were, over the years that I had seen, and making the same mistakes all the time, right? And they're pretty basic, but a lot of people just don't see it that way. So I figured, you know what, if I were just starting out and buying properties and whatever, and investing for myself, what would I want to know when I was going through it? And so that's basically why I put that together. A lot of it has to do with the way first of all, it starts out at the beginning in the due diligence. To me, due diligence is the crux of real estate investing.
You make your money buying. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And you just, I tell people, it's not the sexiest part of investing, but it's definitely, one of the most important by far, because very rarely, if you know what you're doing, is a property going to be worth the same as when you sign the contract to at the end of your due diligence period. Why? Because you've peeled back a bunch of layers, you've drilled down very deeply, and you found out all the different various factors that you could find out that's going to affect the value of that property, right? Because the seller is, or the broker who's selling it, is not coming to you with a list of problems with the properties. They're not saying, hey, you better be looking out for this, and whatever you do, make sure you check this out. And, no, it's
They
not
might
how
tell
it
you
happens.
they might tell you the smallest one that they can
Yeah,
think of,
yeah.
just to throw you
You are
off,
gonna
or red
replace
herring. Yeah.
You replace that gutter in front that's hanging off this, but
It just needs a new
or the
coat of
roof.
paint. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. The roof may need some patching,
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
but it's much deeper, obviously, and most of the lessons that I learned in the book, I learned the hard way, the expensive way. And I always tell people it's always cheaper and easier to learn from other people's mistakes, so.
Well, that's awesome that you've, brought that value to folks who, are trying to do a similar thing that you are, and hopefully help their learning curve be a little bit easier.
Yeah. That's, my hope for the people to pick it up. And I've had great feedback on it. So it's been, like I said, very gratifying to know that it's helped people. So
That's great.
But,
so I was gonna. Oh, were you gonna continue
well,
on
the second
value?
one I kind of basically explained the premise of, which is if you're gonna buy this stuff, now you have to make sure that you keep it leased, and how can you create additional value through lease structures. And what if you're in you buy it and you're in a soft market, and now you have to find tenants to replace tenants. Hey, right now we're going through probably one of the worst ones I've ever witnessed in my real estate career.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg right now. This is coming down the pike here. It's going to be tectonic change of the way people approach it. And, some of these businesses aren't going to be coming back to occupy their space.
Right.
And on a going forward basis, what do you do? How do you secure your tenants and your property and your income stream and all that stuff? So it's going to be is and will continue to be a huge learning curve for a lot of people, even people that have been around for a long time.
For sure. One of the things we discussed last week when we were chatting, this idea of, co-working and co-living was this, big thing last year, for the last probably 2 years or so. It's been building up, and all the articles I was reading in January were saying, 2020 is going to be the year of co-working and co-living, and it's going to be this huge boom. Obviously things have shifted in the last couple months. And I'm curious, with about half of folks in America now, somewhere between 25 and 50% of Americans working from home, doing this, Zoom chats and all that. Do you think that co-working and co-living will continue to scale once we do sort of, shift back into a growth economy here? Or how do you see that market shifting?
Well, you bring up an interesting point there with us all being forced to work out of our homes. Many of us, which probably the vast majority of us, are in that in a kind of industry that would allow you to do that. But I think that's going to emphasize the point that you don't necessarily have to be sitting in an office to be productive or get things done, right?
Right.
And I was talking about this with somebody a couple days ago, that the whole WeWork thing and the collaborative workspace, I knew it solved some issues. It also created some issues at the same time. It's actually probably going to create more issues than help, because the WeWork is the biggest tenant in New York City.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what's going to happen there when, a bunch of people aren't going to be excited about, sitting around with other people in close proximity. It's going to take a while for this pandemic paranoia, I guess you would say, to die out in people's memory, right? And even once things settle down, and I'm not yet, I'm not a soothsayer. I can't tell you when it's all gonna be normalized again. Hopefully it's this year is what we're hoping,
Yeah.
But
Well, it's an
but
interesting
people's
trend.
memories are much.
I was going to say it's an interesting trend in the industry. I mean, over the last 10 years or so, tell me if I'm off here, but I think the amount of square footage like per worker, in an office was somewhere around 300 or 400 square feet, per employee. And then over the last 10 years, it's been going down and down to the point where now you're anticipating somewhere in the like 100, 150 square feet per employee. Yeah, this changes that idea, because that proximity, if everybody needs their 6 feet, or 10 feet or whatever.
That and I just think it's not really the perfect solution for everybody. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's going to go away and we're never going to see this type of thing again. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it could work for certain industries and certain businesses that actually benefit from that collaboration. But what they were finding in some industries, it was actually not even productive. It was counterproductive, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that we're going to see that change up quite a bit. I actually think that we're going to see a much what's the word I'm looking for? Diminished need for office space, because number one, there's a lot of businesses are going to be not around. Number two, people, like we talked about, find that they can do quite a bit from their home environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And or remote environments, however you want to, play it or work it. But and then also that it's going to be more acceptable to corporations. We were running on an old model anyway. I think you and I were talking earlier about that Japan study where they found that when they went to a 4-day work week, their productivity jumped 20% plus, right?
Exactly.
And that was over a period of time. It wasn't just a fluky thing. So some of the American corporations thought they'd give that a shot, and they found out that they were getting the same results. So I think what happens is we were running on an old model, but like anything else, whether it be areas in a city that are changing or being regentrified, it takes sometimes a generation to turn things around.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying it should take that. Things are moving much quicker than they used to, but it doesn't happen overnight, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So this is a newer model, I should say, that is being tested and tried, and I predict we're going to see more of it, and people will adapt quite easily to it, I think. What's interesting is in the 1970s, I remember as a young buck reading in all these articles, we won't be working, we'll have so much more leisure time in the future, we'll be working 25 to 30 hour work weeks. Well, it turned out to be the opposite. We were working longer than 40 hour work weeks, right? So all this technology was supposed to simplify things and make things easier. All it did is it kind of stretched out the work day, because now people are calling you at night when you get at home.
Exactly.
On weekends. And, And I think this is a much needed change in society, and
It just sort of brings a magnifying glass on something that was already happening to some degree, some trends that were already shifting,
right,
right. And some things that were already, moving in one direction or the other. And now we're actually having time to sit down and look at it and think about it, rather than just being busy 80 hours a week,
No, I think it's accelerating the change, right? And I think it'll be it'll be a good thing in a many different aspects of it, though.
Well, what's interesting about the Japan study that you mentioned is when you start to dive into the why of that productivity. I mean, obviously you and I talked a little bit about, people that are commuting, maybe an hour or more to work. And so you're talking about a couple hours a day that, yeah, you can do some stuff in the car, but not the same amount you can when, maybe you're hungry and you're thinking about breakfast and, whatever. You can't be fully productive when you're at home. There is the opportunity for making sure that all of your basic needs are met. You can skip off to the bathroom or the kitchen, or, check on your family or whatever really quickly without necessarily, upending the flow of your day.
Right.
But I also think productivity to some degree is based on some of the stuff I've read on happier, healthier workers, individuals. And so I wonder if, I guess my specific question is, are traditional investors, when they're looking at portfolios and things, I'm bringing it back to sustainability here. Sustainability, a big part of it is creating healthier, better performing buildings so that the people who are living in them and working in them or just interacting with those buildings, are happier and healthier. And so I guess this is a twofold question where I'm kind of saying, obviously working from home can lead to some of that happier, healthier environment. But for folks that are still needing to work in an office, or, the co-working or collaborative environment is something that that's important to their business model. Are traditional investors seeing that? Are they seeing these sustainability things? Are they seeing, hey, happier, healthier individuals, I want to add these things in because it's going to create a longer term lease. It's going to, create lower vacancy in a building that maybe is a residential building. It's going to be less turnover, less headache for me because people are going to come and actually stay because the building cares about them, to not sound too holistic, but.
Yep. I think to answer that question directly, yes, there are some investment companies that are starting to put much more emphasis on that. I think what's going to happen now is, before it was kind of an option to try to figure it out. Now it's not so much an option. Okay, it's like, do you want to survive? Do you want your asset to be valued more than what you paid for it?
Right.
Okay, well, you better start figuring out ways to attract, tenants in there and make it so it becomes more valuable and they're willing to pay the price to be there. Because what happened in the past, and what has kind of gradually happened, is, I'll use downtown Los Angeles as our example, since you and I can relate to that, and maybe our listeners will be able to visualize this and understand it a little bit. But there was a section in the 90s that was developing called Bunker Hill down there, and it's kind of like the resurgence of the downtown Los Angeles market. Well, in today's market, that is no longer considered a real viable market. Not too many people want to be there because buildings are older, there's no amenities close by, so they're all moving down closer to the LA Live, Staples Center, Convention Center down near there, where there's all the amenities and lots of things going on, new properties, and it's just a much more happening area over there. So,
and the reason some of those amenities are there is because of some of these mixed use buildings, right? I mean, you've got residential up top, and then you have, they're trying to bring activity to the front.
Exactly. It's kind of it's just kind of a self generating environment, because the people that are moving there are saying, hey, we want this, or, and then they get more of that and they see that's working. So that brings more businesses in there.
Mhm.
And so now these buildings up on Bunker Hill are emptying out, which is not that far, what is it, a couple miles or whatever,
Walkable, yeah, for sure.
yeah, walkable. But nonetheless, it's just why be there when you can be here, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so what's happening is they're going to have to start thinking about how to repurpose those properties. And what will happen with those is they'll probably go some kind of mixed use thing where maybe, let's say it's 35-story building, and they've got maybe the first 5 or 10 floors would be office work oriented, maybe have a gym, some retail, some eateries, things like that, daycare, whatever. And then above that would be residential,
Mhm.
right? And then maybe at the top, there's some kind of a, entertainment oriented
Sure.
restaurant,
Yeah.
nightclub or something. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
coming up with, But there you
Or
have.
even like some condos, like luxury condos.
Or right. Yeah, exactly. So conference centers or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I see that happening there, because it makes no sense really to go there and then demo a 650,000 foot building or whatever it is. Just repurpose it, right? They've done it in Chicago and
Yeah.
New
Chicago's
York,
done a great job. Mhm.
Yeah. So so that I see that happening there, but the landscape of this is definitely going to be changing. Retail was already on its heels before this even happened. They were trying to figure out, what's going to work here. The retailers that weren't service oriented, or they were still trying to figure out how to fulfill their niche by not being internet impacted, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so we're going to see that just got turned upside down right now.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen. But if you were to ask me, well, what do you see in those, new buildings or those retrofitted buildings? Well, I think we're going to probably see like touchless entry. It's going to take all these personal protective kind of measures,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So, they do have the technology now to take people's temperatures as they're walking in the door by, infrared or whatever they do.
That's wild. Yeah.
So I think without getting too big brotherish here, it'll give people another comfort level, right? If you were coming out of this pandemic thing that we're coming into and your offices were going to be moving, would you rather be in a building that has touchless entry and all this stuff?
Right.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Very much.
the other piece
Yeah.
of that too, specifically for residential and multifamily, is incorporating. I know some of these co-living places, one of the big draws is you don't have to clean, because there's a cleaning person that is part of management that is there, maybe every day or once a week or whatever, and does like a full Clorox scrub down, and that was already happening. I can see that definitely taking hold as an amenity, which is an interesting amenity. You wouldn't have thought, like it's almost like the hotel model and the apartment model
Being melded.
and the co-working model all sort of like coming together. We talked a little bit about that, where maybe you're providing an amenity that was a separate building, like a co-working space or whatever. You would go to your co-working space that was a mile away. Well, what if it's in your building? And now as a tenant in that building, you can work from home as much as you want, but then you need to do a Zoom call or whatever, and you've got a brand new baby or something, and you don't want to be interrupted. There's a
Right.
space for you to go down. There are some co-working or co-living places that cater to musicians, and they have like music studios in the actual building. And so I can see that creativity becoming more and more important as a developer, as a builder, or somebody renovating an older building like that. Coming up with those amenities that you might not have thought of 5 years ago as an amenity for a residential building.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think all that's going to play into the future of all of it, even urban, even suburban in some way. There's going to be changes with that. I mean, we were already starting to see the beginnings of some of this with the ghost kitchens and what have you that are becoming much more prevalent. Delivery, much more prevalent than it ever was. People that can avoid, especially in the major metropolitan areas, getting on a busy freeway will be are more than happy to take advantage of those services that are out there. So this is kind of basically not only accentuating but accelerating the whole acceptance of it, I think, for all across the generations.
Yeah. Are there any downsides, do you think? I mean, we've talked a lot about the upsides to let's call it multi-use instead of mixed use, because mixed use tends to be two different uses, but multi-use, as we're talking about, maybe you have 5-6 different uses in the same building. Are there any downsides to that, or is it all positive?
I think I think it will have to work itself out, because we don't know necessarily I mean, there's some obvious ones, right? But I think there's probably examples out there that could be used that where it does work, right? And so it's a matter of, I think, who your user base is, right? Mm-hmm. And what is it that they're looking for? I think that's really, the commercial real estate landscape is kind of morphing into another type of landscape that we're still experimenting with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, mixed use just used to mean retail on the bottom and either office on top or residential on top. Now it's a lot of different things, right? Sure. And it's you're starting to see it more. And before, I remember it was like, yeah, that's weird. I don't know if I'd want to go there and do that. Now, if very dense area, hey, is it going to save you 40 minutes on driving side streets or jumping on a subway or whatever, a bus or whatever it is? Yeah, hey, sure, I think I can get used to it real quick if I don't have to do that, right?
Sure.
So I think it's just a matter of what it is, where it is, and people will decide for themselves. Yeah, I like that. I'll give that one a try.
Are there any outside of the box, strategies or value adds that we haven't discussed so far? I'm going to throw one out there in a second, but I'd love to hear before I prompt you if there's any that you've seen or thought about or heard people discuss that we haven't already discussed.
We've kind of covered most of the ones that I'm familiar with. I'm sure there's others out there. To me, it's if I were, let's say, if I had a large apartment complex that a few hundred units that I wanted to keep my tenants and attract more tenants into, and I had just gotten them, I'm renovating it. What would I want to do there to make sure that I, have a differentiation amongst my competition out there, right? Mm-hmm. And besides the obvious one, like, fitness facility and, a game room or something, or a business center, maybe you add some other amenities in there that are not typical, but you could find that would be either hair and nail salons or, different, it just depends on the demographic that you have in there, right?
Right.
But I think if you had something like that in there, you're gonna, depending upon the socioeconomic structure that that was occupying it, you'd probably get people say, hey, that's pretty cool. I could go there and get a haircut or whatever the case may be, and have those amenities that are in there, and it may just support a small either an owner user of a business or something like that. So
Yeah.
I think you're gonna, maybe it's a dry cleaners, maybe it's a, you know, juice bar. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there,
Sure,
but
yeah.
it could be any combination or number of those kinds of things.
One that we're sort of, I work for a design development company here in Santa Monica, and one that we're playing around with is automated parking, which is something that you've seen in New York for a while. Not always integrated into the building. Generally in New York, it was just like a parking lot, and they were like, all right, let's build this steel grid, and now we can park 180 cars instead of 60 cars, or whatever, because we can go 3 or 4 floors up. But one of the strategies we're looking at for this building and we're working on right now is automated parking, where literally you pull into a bay, you get out of the car, you leave your key in there, or no, I'm sorry, you don't leave your key in there. You take the key, and nobody's ever touching your car. It's like valet without the valet. Now there are a lot of, obviously the big challenge for that is convincing people that
your car's okay, and it's not
that your car's okay, that if something breaks down or the grid goes down, how do I get to my car? So there's some factors to consider, certainly, but they are workable. There's one in West Hollywood. The city of West Hollywood building has one right behind it, and the cool part about it is it's like valet without having anybody get into your car, which again, in this particular environment that we're in right now, looking at the other side of it, could be a benefit. I don't know that I want a valet hopping in my car and touching my car, or they're going to wear a mask and, gloves when they get in there. So in this case, you lock it, it's locked, you leave, the robots take your car up to its parking spot. And when you come back, you throw your payment in there, and then within 30 seconds, 60 seconds, one company, Utron, that we've been talking to, says 2 minutes is like the tops that you'll wait. Think about how long you've waited for a valet in your life, and obviously in a busy time that's going to be longer. So have you heard of that in any buildings here?
Not the self valet, but I've obviously seen it in other properties where they have the lifts, right? And they cost about $8,000, I think, per lift, something like that. You can get them refurbished. I mean, there's a bunch of, they're actually been around that long. I think when I first saw them, a lot of people were kind of freaked out by them, like, nah, what if the thing fell onto my car, and then, whatever. So, but I think what's happened now is they're starting to see them, especially if you go downtown, you're starting to see them more down there where they have just the parking lots and they're stacking them. But I think it's become more acceptable. I have not run into the ones that you're talking about where you pull your car up and then make the payment, and then it goes up to the, I don't know, what, I guess it's just two on one on top of the other.
I'll share a video with you. It's actually, so like this particular strategy is cool because you can fit more cars in a smaller space, because 2 reasons. There's nobody walking around there. So you don't have to duct the building. You don't actually have to have heating and air conditioning in that section of the building, where traditionally you would have to. And then your first level, you'd have to have 6 or 8 feet worth of ducting and all your systems down there. Now you don't have to have that. So in what would have been 1 level of parking, you can actually now have almost 1.5 or 2 levels of parking. So you don't have to dig down as far if you're going subterranean. So there's some benefits on that end, but literally it's just these 2 rollers, one that goes under your front axle and one that goes under your back axle. And while the car's in park, these 2 little things come and lift up the car, and then it rolls it onto an actual lift. So it's not parked. It's parked traditionally. It's, the only difference is how it gets up there. But it's on a concrete, parking structure. It's not suspended in the air or anything crazy like that. It's pretty cool. And there's some awesome, obviously, sustainability features in that, where you're, less impact on the environment, not having to do as much build out. So there's some cost savings too for a developer.
No, that makes total sense. I think it's like anything else. People have to get used to the idea, once they see other people going there and doing it, it's like, okay, it's not that bad. I think I would let that, let my car be parked that way. So, and those of us that have been downtown and try to find parking, and you get in a structure and then you can't find a space in there, and you're driving around and you drive out, then you go to the next place, and and your car looks like it's in an ocean of cars in there, and you're how are we going to get this out? And to me, makes the other way you just explained seem actually not only easier, but more protective of the car in some ways.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting. I mean, you're talking about these autonomous cars that will be taken over in the next whatever 5-10 years, and what's going to happen then? This will be antiquated, because unless
it won't need to park. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, it'll just be at some remote location and close by, and they'll figure that one out. So it's hard to say what how this, when you project out in the future, how it's all going to work. But it's kind of interesting to try to see how that could work out with all that. So
I'm curious, I hadn't asked you this when we spoke initially, but have you seen an uptick at all in buildings and investors' portfolios with LEED certification, or any
you
of those?
Say uptick? I wouldn't say it'd be an uptick. I think what's happening is people are actually realizing more and more that it wasn't just kind of hey, want to be the first one on your block to be a LEED certified building. Now it's like, hey, people are really looking heavily at that when they're making their decisions, and they actually don't mind spending a little bit more to be in a LEED certified building if in fact it's within the ballpark of the cost, because it's just cost benefits, and they're just sometimes it actually can make more sense, right? Because if they're passing through operating expenses for energy and what have you, obviously the LEED certified building is going to be much more efficient in that respect and less cost. So there are some arguments for that. But I mean, yes, I do think that does actually enhance the leasability of properties.
And therefore the asset value at the end of the day.
Right, exactly. So it's like when you go to sell it, hey, it's LEED certified and it's like, so, all of this stuff is kind of getting spearheaded right now, because it's, as buildings empty out, as they have in the past during recessions, what have you, right? Mm-hmm. And tenants start looking around for space. When they do, they start scrutinizing, right? And at the end of the day, it's okay, what are we getting here and how much does it cost us? Mm-hmm. Right? It's not rocket science or punch in a calculator. But I think it goes a little bit deeper from the respect that if you don't have something to differentiate yourself, then you're just another address on the list, right? So when you start saying, hey, this is what we're charging, but this is what you get in our property, right? And we use all, LEED certified equipment and these
non-toxic, materials,
carpet and wood, all that, all that stuff, right? Sure. And we have these amenities in there, and we've realized, this amount of savings once we retrofit it or compared to the other properties in the area. So it's like, wow, that's pretty impressive, right? And then we also do quarterly or biannual, duct cleaning and disinfecting and all that stuff. So all that stuff's going to be, hey, this is a no-brainer. Let's just go here, mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. It's like, for the additional whatever it is per square foot, it's not that much. It's another 10% or 8%. Well, let's just go here. Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, and with the cost of some of those things, and the knowledge about some of the materials and the, pushing the edge there, some of those costs that used to be a lot more, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, are now pretty similar. And so with some smart design and some sort of integrative work on the front end, you can realize maybe even some savings on
Yeah,
some of
no,
those.
absolutely. And um, if it's not now, in the not too distant future, it's not going to be even an option for some people. It's kind of
Right.
like, no, we would never go into a building like that, right?
Yeah.
And once your building is in that category, it slips down into a different class,
Right.
which you cannot get the same rents. And then you're catering to a different type of tenants that are in there.
Yeah, exactly. I liked what you said. That was a good soundbite, though. With you have to stand out. What is it about your particular building? What value are you
From your
bringing?
competition? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, they do that now, but I think it's not as apparent, but it will be. Like I said, I truly think once things settle down, and I can't tell you exactly when that's going to happen, but we will start seeing marketing of properties with some of the different things we just talked about. The touchless entries and the toxic whatever it is, eliminations of materials and the the ducting. They've gotten some pretty cool technology now to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That like you said, isn't that crazy expensive as it used to be, right?
Yeah.
Not as labor intensive as it used to be. So with that, it's, you're really setting yourself apart from your competition when you're able to do that.
Yeah. And you've got, again, we don't have to talk in depth about this, but, there's legislation. You talked a little bit about, like, you're going to have to do these things. And, to some degree, especially in California, you have places like Berkeley, UCLA has now said that all of their new construction are going to be all electric buildings. And we can have the longer discussion, some other time about how much electricity costs and all those sorts of things. But really, at the end of the day, the goal of that is, again, that better performing, healthier, so that the people that are in the building are actually benefiting from the building itself.
Absolutely.
And the community is benefiting too.
Yeah. And I think that on a going forward basis, that's the way developers are looking at, building their buildings, is basically because you don't want to be having to go back after the fact and redoing some of this stuff, because it makes zero sense, and it may cost you more up front, but in the long run, it's really creating more value for your property. The issue is these properties that are older right now and don't have these things, those costs have to be factored in when you're looking to purchase them. That's where my due diligence information will be implemented in it, because you got to factor in those costs when you're factoring in what you're able to pay for the property.
Yeah. That's actually a perfect segue. I mean, I've really enjoyed having you here. Thank you so much for the discussion, for your expertise in this area. Do you want to go ahead and just talk a little bit about if anybody wants to contact you or, find the books?
Yeah, sure.
Where can they go?
I'm happy to answer any questions regarding due diligence, whatever. My email address is Brian, BRIAN, at Impact Coaching Systems, that's with an S.com, impactcoachingsystems.com. And then my phone number is 818-371-0311. That's 818-371-0311. You can check my books out at amazon.com. It's Brian Hennessey, HENNESSEY. And then it's also on Audible and iTunes, the books as well. So it's the Due Diligence Handbook for Commercial Real Estate, the How to Add Value Handbook for Commercial Real Estate. And the third one, for any of those that are residential agents out there, it's the Residential Agents Handbook for Commercial Real Estate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate you joining me.
Ian, thanks for the invite. Really enjoyed it.
All right. I will talk to you on the flip side.
Okay.
Thanks.
Building the future, Green Building in the New Millennium, brought to you by Sustainable Homes of the Future.